This is Call on the Field Stands with a special NFL mock draft edition. Ryan and I beat each other up over agreeing upon picks, so we got one mock draft to deliver here with some thoughts and opinions on notable players. So we're going to jump right into it here.
Yeah, and actually, now you mentioned, like, we did each of our own, then combined it, but each of our own were pretty close on a lot of these. And we had different players, a lot of the positions were like. But, you know, obviously starting it off, Cincinnati Bengals, first pick of the draft. This has been decided for weeks now, if not months. Joe Burrow, quarterback, LSU. Pretty obvious pick. This is going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Best quarterback in the draft by far.
Yeah, best quarterback. They need a QB. Dalton's a bum, and he's out of there anyways. They're going Burrow. Second pick, Redskins. There's a little bit of interesting stuff. There's talks about going Tua here. They're likely going to probably trade this pick because they don't want to go Tua, because they got Dwayne Haskins last year. Chase Young, edge, The Ohio State University. What are your thoughts on that? Quickly on Chase Young, best defensive player in the draft. It's kind of obvious to have him go second, but that's my opinion. What do you say?
We'll get to the next pick with my personal best player in the draft, but Chase Young, edge rusher, freak athlete. I mean, his first step and his hands are elite. He gets after the passer. Yeah, makes total sense to take him at number 2.
They do need offensive line, but you know they got their quarterback. Terry McLaurin looks like a dog. They got the receiver. Now they just need, you know, that guy, that dude, if you will, on defense.
It's kind of like
Chase Young seals that up.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Myles Garrett type situation.
Yeah.
Like
he's too good. He's too good to pass up on. Number 3, as mentioned, going defense again with the Lions. Isaiah Simmons, linebacker, Clemson. A lot of different things. Initially, I had Okudah there, but ultimately we switched it because you initially had mentioned Simmons, and I was like, you know what, that does make a lot of sense when we were talking about it a week or so back, so I had him as well. What's your thoughts on Simmons? I mean, I was going to say Chase Young's best player in the draft. You wanted to have your own opinion on that, on the best defensive player.
I personally think Isaiah Simmons is the best player in the draft and like the safest to be that generational talent. Now, Chase Young very well could be. And actually with this 3rd overall pick with the Lions, they're in a decent spot to trade down if a team wants to take Tua.
Same with the Skins, yeah.
Yeah, they themselves,
they're in a similar position.
If they want to take Tua and move on from Stafford, who knows?
That would be dumb in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people had Okudah here. You did, like you said, and I could totally see that.
Yeah, they can go a lot of different ways.
So what's interesting about putting a mock draft together, now that we actually did it, like seriously, not just a stupid simulator online for our favorite team, is weighing between what you think a team should do versus what we think the team will actually do.
Right.
So in this case, in my opinion, they would be foolish not to take Isaiah Simmons here. He's a total game changer on defense. I mean, the dude lined up at safety. Sometimes he was at cornerback, man on man. He plays in the box. Like, he's that perfect mix between safety and linebacker for modern
offenses.
He's
a freak athlete.
Yeah.
His combine statistics were absurd.
Oh, my God. When he ran a sub 4.4 40, it was like, okay, this dude at 6'4", 230 something?
Yeah, I think that's what sealed it for me to have him jump over Okudah. He's one of those guys. Like, I think Chase Young's the best player in college football. I think he's the best player in the draft. That's why I had him going second to the Skins. But Isaiah Simmons is in that conversation, especially with his athleticism. And like you said, what he's able to do pretty much anywhere on the field, you can line him up and he'll ball the fuck out. So his versatility in that respect makes him even that much better. So I think it's a safe pick for the Lions there at 3. But like we mentioned, Redskins and Lions both could very well trade out of there with the next couple picks that we're going to announce here in a couple seconds with those teams. But before we get to those, the Giants need a lot. We have them going Jedrick Wills, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Like I said, they need so much, especially offensive tackle. They need to protect Daniel Jones, their new young quarterback who showed a lot of promise last year. You know, you got Saquon back there. He needs some guys to open up things. They do need receiver here as well. They do need defense, but I think offensive tackle, for the most part, makes a lot of sense for them, in the most sense, especially with Daniel Jones, being a young guy who needs some stability up front, which goes into the more interesting 2 picks here, Miami and the Los Angeles Chargers. As we mentioned, I think one of these 2 teams will trade up, but since we didn't do trades in our mock, we have Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback Alabama, going to Miami Dolphins. Makes so much sense. They need a quarterback, You got Fitzmagic back there. He can, they can even have Tua sit a year if they want to. What are your thoughts on Tua here for the Dolphins?
I like the reports that came back about his full recovery from surgery and, that hip injury. He is laser accurate. And, I mean, the only thing with Tua a couple things that scare me is, one, and I try not to let this affect my opinion on players, but one, he's playing in Alabama. I mean, the players around him are just sick. The fact that he had Ruggs, Judy, Jalen Waddle to throw to, and Smith to throw to is just absurd. Plus, you got Wills going top 5 and had their other offensive tackle, Leatherwood, come out. He would have been top 10 projected too.
And you got Najee Harris, one of the best running backs in the nation.
Yeah, a freak.
Sitting up behind him every down. Like, their offense was fucking loaded.
Yeah, it was insane. And,
I can get 60 yards passing in a play when I just throw a screen to Jerry Jeudy and let him just house it.
Exactly. He's a cheat code.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he did deliver laser accurate football. So,
and he has a gun.
And he has a gun. He can play in the pocket. It scared me a little bit against better competition like Georgia. He got knocked out of that game, and before he got knocked out, he was not playing all that spectacular. Yeah. And against Clemson, obviously, they got to him when they started mixing up coverages. So that stuff can be developed and whatnot. But the big one,
he did ball out against LSU though, playing on that injury.
That's true. He made some plays. Yeah, he just the other thing that scares me is the injuries. I mean, he's not that big.
Right.
He's really not that big of a QB. So, but as far as this draft is concerned, it makes total sense that he's the second quarterback taken off the board.
I agree. And also, he's mobile and athletic enough to do shit with his legs, but he doesn't rely on that.
Right.
And that is going to help his ability to stay healthy, hopefully. He's not going to be running as much. So that could play into his favor that he doesn't have to rely on that. So, moving along to the Chargers, this could go a lot of different ways as well, but we went Justin Herbert, quarterback from Oregon. Another pick that, it's also going to be very determinant on what happens in free agency. Like if they sign Tom Brady, they're not picking a quarterback here. If they sign one of these veteran guys who's up in free agency, they won't go this route, but I ultimately think they will go quarterback. Justin Herbert is, I think, one of the better, obviously we have him third quarterback off, top 5 pick. I think he is, he's getting the credit he deserves because in a lot of these mock drafts, even if you look online for others, they'll have him high. But it almost seems like he wasn't really getting mentioned a lot in the discussion for the top QBs all that often. But I think watching him several times this past season, he is that good. And I think he's ready to start day one. He can come in and be the Chargers quarterback, a team that just is basically a competent quarterback away in many respects, even though they had a down year with, even though they had Phillip Rivers. They have a lot of pieces in place, especially on the defense.
For sure.
And just re-signed Eckler. They got some pieces on the outside. Keenan Allen's still around. So they have pieces in there. Fill in a quarterback who can do a little bit of things. They can make a little bit of a run. I don't know if you have any comments on Justin Herbert here at number 5.
I really didn't get to watch him that closely this year. They need a QB. So Herbert is third on my list.
Yeah.
So, it makes total sense for them to take him. The little I did watch, he's definitely capable of making plays with his arm and feet. So,
definitely. I think he's going to be one of the sleeper QBs that, everybody's talking about Tua, everybody's talking about Burrow, but I think Herbert's going to have a nice career and a nice start to his season right off the get-go, right as he joins the Chargers here at number 5.
Yeah, that'd be sweet, man. Have to see how that plays out. Next, we got the Carolina Panthers. New head coach, Matt Rule, coming over from the college ranks. We have Derek Brown, interior D lineman from Auburn. They're another team being in the top 10 that could go a lot of different directions here.
Yeah.
But their run defense efficiency is not good. It's toward the bottom of the league, and Derek Brown is the second best defensive lineman in the draft. He's just a freak.
Yeah, freak athlete. He's going to be a beast.
Yep. So we're going Derek Brown there. Another guy could be Jeffrey Okudah. But next we got the Cardinals, and we agreed on CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver out of Oklahoma. We both agreed wide receiver here.
Right. We did have some back and forths. Like I mentioned, we each made our own mock draft and then kind of combined them with our different conversations. I think you had Judy here, or who'd you have going here?
I actually had Judy as my number one receiver.
Okay.
But after Ruggs ran that 40 time, it just seems like there's always a team that falls in love with the combine and the 40, and Ruggs is really good. And I picked the Cardinals to be that team to
that would make a lot of sense.
If you will.
They need that, that freak. I mean, they got Larry Fitzgerald, who's old as balls. He's still coming back somehow. Still playing this next season, by all accounts. They need that electrifying juice guy on the outside for Kyler Murray. And why I wanted to go CeeDee Lamb, and it looks like, obviously I convinced you to do so. The matchup, or the reuniting of Kyler Murray and CeeDee Lamb just makes too much sense to me right here.
Yeah.
They balled the fuck out when they were both at Oklahoma, and to carry on that relationship and basically have that smooth transition where they don't really have to do a lot. CeeDee Lamb is, in the conversation, arguably the best wide receiver in this draft, easily in the conversation with a couple of other guys that you mentioned. So makes a lot of sense for them to go wide receiver. Makes a lot of sense for them to go CeeDee Lamb. So that's what we decided to do.
For sure. And you could see offensive tackle there too, but doing some reading, they just signed DJ Humphries to a 3-year extension, and doing some reading on Justin Murray, their other offensive tackle. He improved toward the end of the year. So, it makes sense to go receiver here and reunite CeeDee Lamb.
Get a weapon and then address offensive line maybe later in the draft, 2nd, 3rd round if you want to.
Yep. So next we got the Jacksonville Jaguars picking 9th. And if Okudah falls here, we haven't taken Okudah. If he falls to 9, it's a no-brainer. You got to take him. I mean, he didn't run the fastest 40, I think, that people were thinking he was going to. But as far as his agility and his fluidity and his hips, like he is the best man cover corner in the draft.
Oh, most definitely. And you forgot to mention DB, the Ohio State University.
Yeah, I ain't gonna say that.
I mean, a lot of the mock drafts I did before this official one that we put together the other day, I had Okudah going 3, and I had Simmons somehow dropping to 9 here, and another situation where if Simmons were to drop there, they couldn't pass him up. They were going to take him. If Okudah drops here to 9, they can't pass him up. They're going to take him. He's just too much of a weapon, especially in the league where you need cornerbacks more than ever with the new pass interference rules and how they're, basically giving every advantage possible to the wide receivers. If you can have a lockdown man-to-man corner on the outside, that puts you ahead of a lot of teams in the league.
For sure.
And he's the best guy in that category in this draft. One of the better man-to-man, straight-up athletic best cornerbacks we've seen, in my opinion, in quite some time in the draft. So it just makes too much sense for them. And it's one of those you couldn't pass him up.
Yeah, totally agree. They got to take him if he's there. So next we have our hometown team, Cleveland Browns, picking at number 10. And it's pretty obvious what they need. They need a tackle. They need a lot, but they need a tackle. And this draft has a bunch of them.
Correct.
And we got Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa going here at number 10.
Yep. 2nd offensive tackle off the board. Athletic freak. I mean, it can go any number of these tackles, but I think Tristan Wirfs really has shown what he can do athletic-wise in the combine. What did he run? 4.8 something like that.
It was freakish for his size.
Big ass athletic dude on the end of your offensive line is exactly what they need, especially when Stefanski coming in is going to run a lot of that zone with Nick Chubb. You're going to need athletic linemen who can really move and get outside, and he's one of those guys. He might be the most athletic offensive lineman in this draft. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to go Tristan Wirfs. I'm hoping, like you said, hometown team, hometown Browns. I'm hoping that's who they land, because I think he's going to be the best offensive lineman in this draft and who would fit the Browns the best.
Yeah.
I guess that's my next pick, because I stole your Justin Herbert here. I wasn't really paying much attention to my color coordination when I stole your Herbert. But as mentioned, a lot of these offensive tackles. Next up, the Jets at 11. They're going Andrew Thomas, tackle out of Georgia. Another one of those guys up there who's atop of the offensive tackle list in an offensive tackle stud draft. What says you on Andrew Thomas?
I think Andrew Thomas makes a lot of sense. He was my number 1 tackle there during the college football season for a while. So they got to go offensive line, in my opinion. Protecting the QB is extremely important. Not just with the Browns last year. We've seen what a bad offensive line can do
Correct.
to a young QB that, even if they have a bunch of talent. Unfortunately, we've seen 2 QBs now, Baker Mayfield, and who still has potential, and Tim Couch basically run for his life every time you drop back. So got to get the tackle. And Andrew Thomas is the next best tackle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of falls into the comments that we made again about the Giants. They need a lot. They have a young quarterback. The best thing for a young quarterback is to solidify that offensive line. You take the next best offensive lineman in the draft, the next slotted in your slot, and it happens to be Andrew Thomas, in our opinion. Next up, Las Vegas Raiders. Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama. We just had some comments about Jeudy. In my opinion, I think you might have similar opinion. Best wide receiver in this draft, even though we had CeeDee Lamb going to the Cardinals, much because of that reuniting with Murray. But, what are your thoughts on Jerry Jeudy slotted for Vegas? They need some receivers after, trading Amari Cooper to the Cowboys. They need a guy who can slot in and be that number one, especially if they keep Derek Carr. I feel like Derek Carr kind of got the short end of the stick. Everybody's giving him criticisms, but who's he got on the outside after you traded Amari? Right. This could fill that slot. What says you?
I think Jerry Jeudy is an absolute cheat code. I mean, he's got it all. The route, his agility, the quickness of his feet, loose hips, he's got it all. He can run routes. He can catch. He can make plays after the catch. He's a cheat code. He's straight out of the video game. I watched plays this year where he caught just a little bubble, and it almost was like he spun the wrong way or too soon, but it froze the defender enough to where he just took off after he.
And his speed is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
He's the full package wide receiver.
Yeah. So I think it's a great pick for Las Vegas. That's awesome to say.
I know.
And they can really do some damage this draft with 2 first-round picks.
For sure. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. There is a lot of things the Indianapolis Colts could do here at 13. They got Jacoby Brissett still at quarterback. Are they going to move on from him and re-sign somebody? Do they need to bolster their defense a little bit, even though they have Leonard there, who is really one of the better better linebacker in the league? However, we have them going Henry Ruggs, wide receiver, and fastest dude I've ever seen, it feels like.
Yeah, I know.
What are your thoughts on Ruggs going here to the Colts, who have T.Y., who's getting a little older.
Yeah.
But he's really no one. There's been a long time in his career where he's no one opposite of him. They could do some damage with Ruggs.
They need someone else. Their wide receivers struggle to stay healthy. They need a second reliable target.
Right.
And the thing with Ruggs and the rest of the Alabama receivers, including Jeudy, they're all so talented, and their offense was so well balanced, and Tua was so good at being accurate with the football. They all kind of overshadowed each other. You put Ruggs somewhere else, he's going to put up insane stats. So he kind of got overshadowed a little bit with his other abilities outside of speed.
Yeah.
Dude can catch. So he's sure-handed, fastest receiver in the draft. It makes total sense for the Colts to go Henry Ruggs here, in my opinion.
For sure. Next up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another team that on the cusp, close, got a solid D-line, got a 30 and 30 quarterback. We'll see how that ends up for next year if they still have Jameis Winston behind center. But we have them shoring up their offensive line yet again with Mekhi Becton, the biggest freak of nature we've ever seen. And what are your thoughts on offensive linemen here for the Bucs?
This draft is loaded with receivers and offensive tackles, man. And Bucs have the receivers. They need offensive linemen badly. Go with Becton. Dude, what is he, 370? Something like that? And
I think he's bigger than that. I think
he's a freak.
So, athletic lineman fits a lot of their holes and makes them a team that is pretty interesting. They still need a little bit more pieces, but definitely makes it interesting. Next up, 15, the Broncos go T. Higgins, wide receiver Clemson. Got a lot of receivers going in these top 15 picks, and we even have some more later in the draft that we'll get into. But, T. Higgins is another one of those guys who could be considered and arguably the best wide receiver in this draft. To get him at 15, a team that needs some receiver help, hopefully they have their quarterback in Drew Lock. Their offensive line played pretty decent. They have a solid defensive line. Their outside as well is pretty good on defense. Pretty solid team, even though they didn't have a great season. T. Higgins, I think, could do some damage with that offense and open things up.
Next, we got the Atlanta Falcons picking, and they need an edge rusher bad. I mean, it is like they're easily their biggest need on the team. And next we have from LSU, K'Lavon Chaisson, and he is a monster. Watching him on the field this year, especially in the playoffs, he gets after it, man. Like, even if he's not finishing the play and in on the tackle, he's all over the field. So he can do a little bit more than just get to the quarterback. I think he's going to be a really good NFL player. Next, we have the boys, and they need secondary help.
100%.
And in my opinion, I'll ask for your opinion here, but C.J. Henderson is kind of a little shadowed by Okudah, I think, in this draft. 100%. Dude can play.
I mean, if it weren't for Okudah being, like I mentioned earlier, maybe the best corner we've seen in a draft in quite some time, C.J. Henderson is not far off. This dude is the truth at corner. He's another one of those guys who can just go out there, lock somebody down, and you don't really got to worry much about him. He, I think, is going to be one of the more easily, I mean, it's hard to say as corners especially, as one of those positions that's really tough, but with his position particularly, he's going to have one of the easier transitions to the league, in my opinion, from college to pro, because he's just that good. He's that athletic, and his instincts are as good as they get.
Yeah, no, I think he's a great player, and they need secondary help bad to add pieces to that team. Next, we got the Miami Dolphins picking again and taking the quarterback. Got to protect the quarterback. Next best tackle on the board is Josh Jones out of Houston. Just makes sense, man. They got to protect Tua, especially coming off the injury. Like, whatever tackle is there, in my opinion, on the top of their board, that's who they need to take right there.
Yeah, I think this is one of those that I could see them trading down a little bit. They do need an offensive tackle at this spot, I think, or their next pick, and they have another pick later in the draft as well. But you got Tua, you need to protect Tua. But this is almost cusp of stretch. But since we didn't do trades, we had to take the best offensive lineman that was available, which is Josh Jones. But I think they could trade back and look to seek Josh Jones a few picks later, and still get that same pick, but get a little bit more value out of that slot. But I do like that pick, Josh Jones. I think he's going to be really good for that team and a nice stronghold piece for Tua out there in Miami.
For sure. My strategy is find your QB and protect
your QB.
I mean, that two simple steps, then everything else falls in
Cleveland
place.
Browns, for the love of God, follow those instructions.
Yeah, because they sure as shit didn't so far. Next, we got the Las Vegas Raiders again, picking 19th, and their defensive line is pretty damn good, but their secondary ranked 29th and gave up the highest QB passer rating the second highest QB passer rating of 111 per Pro Football Focus. That's atrocious. They go DB, and they go Christian Fulton out of LSU, and again, per Pro Football Focus, he was tied for most forced incompletion the past 2 years of college football. So, dude can defend. Why not go get the best man cover corner with this pick? And then rounding out the top 20 is the Jaguars again. We got them sticking with defense just because of how talented Javon Kinlaw is, in another interior D lineman off the board here out of South Carolina. Just a great value pick at 100%. 20.
Next up, 21, we got the Eagles going Xavier McKinney, safety out of Alabama. What says you, Jeffrey?
So I actually had Justin Jefferson going here, and in general, a receiver, because last year the Eagles did not have a receiver go over 500 yards. They had injury issues, whatever it may be. And I believe Wentz was the first QB to throw for over 4,000 yards and not have a receiver accumulate over 500 yards. So kind of made sense for me to go receiver, especially with the quality of receivers this draft. But I know we both agreed on McKinney, and you had a convincing reason.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Jefferson, like all those points you just mentioned, makes a lot of sense. But we went McKinney. Malcolm Jenkins, in a lot of respects, is one of the better longtime safeties in this league. Most recently, there's been tension that's been reported between him and the team, which means they might not resign, or not resign. They might trade him. So sounds like he doesn't really want to play unless he gets an extension. And if they don't extend him, he's probably going to demand a trade more or less. So that's why we had them filling the void with the safety here and getting Xavier McKinney. And a part of that also is because, like you mentioned, they didn't have a great receiver performance last year. That was in large part by injury. Alshon Jeffrey, one would assume, hopefully will come back healthy this year. Aguilar, I guess you can't really rely on him, but I guess they could address receiver, through free agency or later in the draft. But I think Tide is pushing towards them moving away from Malcolm Jenkins and trading him and filling that slot here with Xavier McKinney. Moving on with the Bills, here we are. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver, LSU. They could definitely use another receiver. They got John Brown, who went over 1,000 yards, and he's a smaller type, fast, down the field type receiver. They can fill a lot of needs in that respect with Justin Jefferson and their young QB. What says you, Jeffrey?
Totally agree. I like Justin Jefferson. I think it's a great value at this pick. If it weren't such a loaded draft with receiver, I think he'd be considered more of a top 15 pick, one of the first 3 receivers off the board. So I think he's a great player, and they got to continue to build that offense around their young quarterback.
Right. Next on 23, we have the New England Patriots drafting Pat Queen, linebacker. And the reason for this is they have most of their whole squad of linebackers up for free agency. Kyle Van Noy is probably for sure gone, who is, arguably their centerpiece of their defense, really, the way he played. What do you think about Queen from LSU here at number 23 for the Pats?
Yeah, I like it. Guy that can be a centerpiece in the heart of the defense there. They need, like you said, they need linebacker help.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
They can go a couple different directions here at this pick, but I think we both agreed that Patrick Queen was the best linebacker available here, and that's where they'd go.
Yep, agree. Next, we got the New Orleans Saints going wide receiver, Baylor, Denzel Mims. And this was a guy that, I didn't have the Saints going receiver here only because I didn't think there'd be as many receivers going as you had. I didn't think Mims would really be a first rounder. I thought they would go a different direction because of that, even though they definitely needed receiver. And I actually think maybe my first mock draft, I had them getting Jefferson because I had Jefferson dropping that one slot. But you still had them going receiver with Denzel Mims. What do you think was the reason for Mims going here for the Saints and not them getting another position that was maybe a little bit higher value in a lot of people's eyes?
So I'll start with the wide receiver comment and the quantity of them we have going in the first round. Teams are going to fall in love. They're already falling in love with offense. And the Saints specifically, we already talked about in our last episode of the podcast, Drew Brees. They're going to re-sign him, but he's a free agent. He's on the back end. It's now or never. They're missing these chances in the playoffs to capitalize. Go all in on the offense and get the talent you think you can get there. Denzel Mims, he's an athletic receiver that actually showed in the Senior Bowl prep and game that, the route tree concerns might not be that concerning after all for a guy like him. So that's who I had next on my board at receiver. So I think the Saints still try to get that passing threat and go with Mims here.
Yeah, and they arguably have the best receiver in the NFL. Pairing another young talent opposite Mike Thomas with Drew Brees is, like you mentioned, in the final stages of his career. It makes a lot of sense, and they really could set themselves up to make that final push, maybe to get them over the edge with their last hoorah with Drew Brees.
Yep, and that's the thing. He's not going to be asked to be numero uno right away. Obviously, you just mentioned Mike Thomas. No, he's just another skill set to put alongside him because there are other receivers. Yeah.
And a lot of the concerns, like you mentioned, can he run all the routes? Because they had such a limited route tree at Baylor. Like, maybe we didn't see everything, but also he could learn alongside Mike Thomas, who, like we said, best receiver in the league. Yeah. Who better to learn from than the best guy in the league? So
not just him, Drew Brees and Sean Payton.
Right.
That'd be a great setup.
That's another thing. Like, there's a reason why Mike Thomas is the best receiver in the league, and it's probably not because he's the most athletic and the most talented. He's certainly not the most athletic. It's because he is fundamental, and he plays with Drew Brees and learned from Sean Payton and that offense and has developed into the best receiver. And a Mims could be a guy who could develop into one of the stronghold receivers and as a 1-2 tandem that could be scary here in the next year or so. At 25, we have the Minnesota Vikings going Trayvon Diggs, DB at Alabama, the 14th Alabama player to go in this draft. A little bit.
It's scary that
hyperbole,
they could have
but
more.
it seems, it seems they have, I don't know, whatever that is, 6 or so. Nevertheless, Trayvon Diggs, we had him a little bit lower initially, but we moved him up in the draft. Why did we do that?
Yeah, at first we had AJ Terrell, who I think could be a fine DB, but I trust Alabama defensive players more than Clemson in some cases, and Alabama has produced the DBs, and with the Vikings, they definitely go DB in my opinion if the right player is there, especially corner, because they could lose both Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander to free agency, so they're definitely going to have a void there at corner. So between Diggs, Terrell, whoever you want to go with, we went with Diggs there.
Yeah,
but I definitely think they're going corner.
Yeah, and they got to go defense for sure there.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So next we have the Dolphins again, 3 first-round picks. If you're a Dolphins fan, and I know we've been excited being Browns fans and having multiple picks, you're going to be amped for this draft because this is an opportunity to totally revamp your team with 3 new young guns to build around.
And it seems like this draft, and maybe it's just prisoner of the moment type situation, but I feel like this draft is stacked with studs. Top to bottom first round, studs all across the board.
Yeah, it just seems like the volume of elite athletes being produced is increasing year to year. And yeah, this first round is pretty loaded on paper anyway, coming out of college.
I mean, there's always going to be busts, but when you look at the list, like there's not a lot of bust candidates. Like, oh, this guy might be a bust. Like there's a lot of guys who are sure things and guys I think that are like at worst their floor is, an average to above average player in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, some of these players, I'm a little iffy on, just my personal opinion, but dude, there are a lot of names on here that were total studs in college. But we have Miami staying with the offensive side of the football to again help Tua, their young QB, and snag Jonathan Taylor right here. Get your stud running back to help take pressure off of your young quarterback.
Makes so much sense. Like I guess it makes so much sense if your goal is to shore up your offense. Like we have them, obviously have 3 picks. We have them going offense, all 3 picks, 2 offensive line running back. If you're going to build around an offense, you want a quarterback, an offensive tackle, and a running back to build around. They still don't really have much on the outside. Their offensive line needs help. Their defense also needs a lot of help. So they could go defense here just because they want to go defense in the first round.
Sure.
But the best player for them, in my opinion, in our opinion for this draft, is Jonathan Taylor, and he solidified himself as a number one wide receiver, number one running back with his combine that he had.
Oh, dude. I mean, when he ran that, 4.39, something like that, it's just, all right, it's over. He's the first running back off the board. And what better fit than Miami? I mean, quarterback and running back touch the ball most. Look at the Cowboys, how they rode Zeke to a bunch of wins when Dak was young. Look at the Giants. I mean, they aren't winning a lot of games right now, but they can rely on Saquon Barkley to carry a huge load.
Right.
I don't know. In my opinion, this is who I take right here, Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like we've seen in years past, a lot of discussion points be running back is not valued as much as it used to be. We're pushing away from running back, going elsewhere. Running back's not as important and that impactful to a team as it used to be. And I think the last couple of years have really quieted a lot of those conversations. Like Zeke got paid out because I think teams are realizing there was a short window there where they were devalued, and then people realize like, okay, you can build around a running back and you can go places with a stud running back. I mean, the Tennessee Titans almost made the Super Bowl with running the ball 95% of the time.
Yeah.
So you can build around running backs.
And, there's context as always. Miami has 3 picks. If this was their only pick and they were as shit, like let's say they traded that, the number 5 pick, and their next pick wasn't until here, I wouldn't say Jonathan Taylor.
Right.
I'd go defense or whatever, best player available. But in this case, build up that offense for your young QB. You don't have to re-sign Jonathan Taylor. Rookie deal, ride him out, help your offense out, and move on to the next thing.
And at that point, you're, one would assume you're picking Tua at number 5. You're gonna you have one of the better quarterbacks, stronghold of your team. He's the guy. You don't really need that reliable to-go-to running back behind your best quarterback, who's competing for MVPs and shit like that. So that's a good point. Like, get him on his rookie deal, Have them stud out, let them walk. You got Tua still. Build around Tua and start competing to win some games.
So
the fact that they won as many games as they did.
Yeah, what a coaching job
roster
to finish. Yeah.
They trade everybody from their entire team. Anybody with any value is gone, and they still win 5 games, something like 6 games. I think
it was 6.
Very impressed.
Yeah. So that Miami draft is actually, well, I know they have 3, but it's an awesome draft. If I were a Miami fan, I'd be stoked about that draft.
And it's almost, and like we said, with how stacked this draft is, it's almost hard to fuck it up.
If you have 3 picks, it's
hard to fuck it up.
Quarterbacks, hit or miss, whatever. But if you have 3 picks, you should, come on, get 2 out of 3 studs. The Seahawks, 27th. Obviously, they didn't have Frank Clark. He played for the Chiefs this year. It looks like Clowney is moving on. It's not happening there, re-signing him. So they need an edge rusher bad. I really wanted to go offense to actually see them build around Russell Wilson, but it just makes so much sense with their edge rusher need to go Yetur Gross-Matos out of Penn State. Dude was an animal off the edge. I 100%. Just think it makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, I mean, they have having Russell Wilson affords them the luxury to go defense here at the slot.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have a stud offense around Russ Wilson, but they have Russ Wilson, who, if it weren't for, Lamar Jackson doing what he did with his legs this year, Russ Wilson would have been the MVP with Tyler Lockett as his number 1 target. Like, you can afford to go defense here, shore that up, get a pass rusher, one of the most important positions on your team, especially on the defense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they need it for their defense. And this draft is deep. I mean, they can nab a receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round, like my boy Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan, who got grossly misused, who is a freak of nature.
There's no way he drops that low in the 2nd round.
Yeah, probably not.
There's no way. They'd have to trade up to get Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, that could be. Anywho, I had to throw that little soapbox in there.
We're only doing a 1st round mock, so you just had to throw a Michigan guy at some point.
Because they ain't in here.
Exactly.
Michigan has 0 firsts in this mock.
You just had to get your comment of a Michigan guy somewhere in this draft conversation.
Hey, in fairness, it's kind of a jab at Jim Harbaugh, if that makes you feel any better. Because he's trash. All right. Next is the Baltimore Ravens at 28. And, they added Marcus Peters last year. That really, God, their defense just took off after that acquisition. Their offense is pretty well set with young, skilled guys, and then you add in Mark Ingram at running back. They're going defense, and A.J. Epinesa here is almost too good to be true at number 28, man.
Yeah, I mean, they moved from, 15 years of Terrell Suggs off the edge getting to quarterbacks, and then now they're probably going to replace him with Epinesa here.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. They also need linebacker help, but
yeah,
it makes too much sense. I mean, if Queen, for instance, were to drop to this point, maybe they go Queen, but we have him up, so it makes a whole lot of sense for them to go edge rusher, basically replace what they're losing in Suggs over all those years, and they kind of lacked it. Especially towards, they didn't really lose until the playoffs, but they could have used that edge rusher, and shoring up, like you said, with Peters, and you add an edge rusher, and with their offense, they're going to be a scary team for years to come.
Yeah. No, you had Kenneth Murray, I believe, here, and I could see him, like you said, Patrick Queen already, but I think we both agree if Epinesa is here, it's like too good to pass up. You got to take him.
Right. Some of those slides earlier, we talked about it too. Like, it just makes him Jeff Okudah with the Jags. Like, if he's there, you can't not take Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, you got to take him.
If Epinesa drops to 28, you can't not take him.
And generally, that's a good strategy. Best talent available, regardless of your need. Like, now, unless you have Myles Garrett, and like, if I don't know that I'd want to take Chase Young, and it would depend on our needs. Trade down. You have options, but yeah, too good to be true at 28. Next, we have the Titans at 29, and we actually both had Jordan Love,
which is kind of surprising.
It's hilarious.
Why did you have Jordan Love here with the Titans?
So Jordan Love is generating a lot of hype, and again, I haven't studied him too closely or anything like that, but the Titans, they're not going to sustain playoff runs with Ryan Tannehill.
No,
it's just not going to happen. So, they have a lot of pieces in place already. Why not risk going Jordan Love here? It's not like Tannehill is total dog shit. I mean, he's at least a decent quarterback. you don't have to rush Jordan Love into anything.
Exactly.
You can still ride the storm with Ryan Tannehill and have Jordan Love observe. And hey, maybe you roll the dice and get lucky with the 29th pick in the first round. And you got a stud quarterback. Why? Yeah. I mean, it's worth the risk.
I mean, you always see quarterbacks drop lower in the draft. Guys go 6th round and turn out to be studs. Like, you could easily see him become a stud for sure. And I think it makes a lot of sense because, like you said, there's probably 2 routes that they go. We talked about previously, like, who's going to be quarterbacks of each team. There's probably 2 options. It's either going to be Ryan Tannehill or Tom Brady. Either way, you have your starter there, and you can slot Jordan Love in to sit a year at least. Ryan Tannehill's not the long-term option. Obviously, Tom Brady's not the long-term option. So you have a guy who can sit for a year, develop, get ready, and following year come in and just start doing his thing. And it just makes a whole lot of sense for the Titans to be the team that takes that gamble and that jump to get a quarterback who some may say might not be first-round talent. Some say he might go top 10 based on trading up and shit. Like, there's a lot of variable options of what he could do, and I think it makes a lot of sense for a guy who needs to sit a year for the most respects. Like, I didn't scout him a lot either, but the experts who we trust have said he could benefit from sitting that year. And when you have almost certainly either going to be Tannehill or Brady at this point, which would make the most sense, slot him in to sit a year, see what happens with his growth and progression over the next couple of years, and you might have your franchise guy at 29th pick in the draft.
Yep, definitely worth the risk in my opinion. Next is the Green Bay Packers, and my opinion was
we had a little controversy, a little back and forth here for this pick,
and so the back 7 or so were actually the most difficult. I felt like is. You could work things out in the top 20, like, okay, we disagree here, but I see your reasoning. It makes sense to know this player. But no, the Green Bay Packers was the one where we were going back and forth on. And I see your reasoning, and we agreed eventually. My only thought was kind of like Russell Wilson. It's always like those teams go, because they understand how good their quarterbacks are, they get a little chintzy on the offensive side of the ball sometimes.
It's true.
So I was thinking receiver because it's a loaded draft for help to supplement Adams. But then I got to thinking about the names that were still available, and it's like, why go there when you can improve other deficiencies and still maybe grab a decent receiver, in the second round? Is the gap going to be, that big? I don't think so. So, we went with Neville Gallimore, defensive lineman out of Oklahoma. Just pulled up his combine. Holy shit, dude. Guy is 300 pounds. Ran a 4.79 40 and had a 5-second 20-yard shuttle. I mean, that's cooking.
This is why this pick just made too much sense for the Packers. Okay, we all saw them in the NFC playoffs against the 49ers, and their defense got slaughtered. Their defensive line looked pathetic. They had Raheem Mostert run for 973 yards and 17 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
They need D-line help. They got to the quarterback plenty fine throughout the season, but they needed a guy who could be a sure all-around D-lineman. Gallimore is going to be a guy who can get to the quarterback, but also help in the run game exceptionally well. With his athleticism and with his size, he's going to be a solid defensive tackle front for the Packers there. And like I said, with how bad that their D-line played, and like you said, with the offense, because you have a great quarterback, yes, they need offensive help. Yes, they need receiver help. Hopefully Aaron Jones goes through and continues his progression and kind of shores up their backfield.
I think he will.
And their offensive line, they might lose, however you say, Balaga. They might lose him. Yeah. However, they need defensive line help. The reason they lost and didn't go to the Super Bowl wasn't because their offense wasn't good enough. It was because their defensive line got sliced for 250 from Raheem Mostert.
Yeah.
That's why they lost that game.
Yeah.
So they need to go defense, and when you can get one of the most athletic D tackles in this draft, you have to do it.
Go for it. No, I'm with it.
Oh, I guess that's me up next. Keep getting this order fucked up. Anyways, 49ers, next up, 31st pick. The reigning Super Bowl defeated team, A.J. Terrell, DB out of Clemson. I mean, they have a lot of talent on this team. One of the better defenses in the league. but we still had him go defense. I mean, Richard Sherman at the DB slot is kind of a zone, almost a safety lining up in corner. To get some more DB help here makes sense. A.J. Terrell, what says you on this A.J. Terrell DB pick for the 49ers?
A.J. Terrell has been a starter for at least the past 2 seasons, maybe even 3 for Clemson. 6'1", lengthy corner, and he ran a 4.42. He's pretty athletic. Big body corner. I mean, can learn from Richard Sherman. And I think it makes sense for them to go defense. I could also see them maybe going offensive line. One note I was reading about, I had Josh Jones here if he was still there at first, just kind of messing around just because Staley could be flirting with retirement here pretty soon. Need to replace that offensive line is key for that offense, obviously, with Shanahan. So I think A.J. Terrell is a good player, though, for sure.
Athletic guy, athletic corner. Like I said, Sherman's more or less on his way out. And just, you can't just neglect corner. But ultimately, I see them probably trading back if they could. Unless there's a guy like Terrell or somebody else who they really love. Most likely, I would assume they'd trade back because, they have so few holes to really fill. They need wide receiver help a little bit. Their quarterback is suspect. They ran the shit out of the rock this year, and their defensive line was crazy good. So they can go a lot of different ways. They could trade back, but I think the best move for them, if they're going to stay here, would be DB. And last but not least, Kansas City Chiefs, reigning Super Bowl champs, Pat Mahomes, best quarterback, best player in the NFL, gets a little bit more help with the backfield. J.K. Dobbins, the Ohio State, shoring up their backfield, replacing Damian Williams, who isn't anything special, and to just add another versatile weapon to that offense is just absolutely disgusting. They could go defense here because they could use some help there, but if you add JK here, their offense is the most unstoppable offense of all time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, though, like, Kansas City still has their key guys. Like, they're guys that make total, awesome plays, which we saw during the Super Bowl. Frank Clark, obviously a beast off the edge. Tyrann Mathieu, beast in the back 7 who can play in the box 2. And then Chris Jones, another baller, just monster on the interior. Obviously he had all those knockdowns in the Super Bowl coming up clutch. So, yeah, they could go defense, but I think they have enough there. Why not go fucking all out on offense, bro? And J.K. Dobbins, in my opinion, I know we talked about Jonathan Taylor, but man, next in line, I like J.K. Dobbins, dude. His strength, agility, vision. I mean, he can run in any sort of running scheme you insert him in. Dude, his ability to jump cut and change directions and find cutback lanes, it's just insane. It's insane. And
did you see that?
You saw he could.
I wonder when that.
Yeah, I fucking did. I also saw him in the passing game, which surprised me too. But I mean, could you imagine adding a talent like that at running back into that offense to help Patty Mahomes, along with their other weapons they have?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about who we think they will pick versus who we think they should pick. And personally, I think J.K. might be the best running back in this draft, even better than Jonathan Taylor.
I wouldn't argue.
If you go, you kind of look at the combine and Taylor blew it up and just blew everybody away. But in my opinion, J.K. was the most well-rounded running back. He could get a little bit better in the blocking side of things, but who couldn't? There's not going to be a Zeke Elliott in every draft. Like, everyone could basically come out of college and get better in the blocking game, especially when you're at a team like Ohio State. Zeke is just an anomaly. So I think he's probably the best running back in this draft. And honestly, I think initially I had Swift going here to Kansas City, and that was one of those, I think they will pick Swift, even though they should pick JK.
Gotcha.
Because I think Swift has gotten a lot more hype long term, and Swift is that athletic guy who everybody's kind of looking at.
Swift is shifty too.
Yeah,
you want to talk about two dudes that can stop on a dime and make a man miss? I mean, these two watch their highlights. They're just
I think JK is going to drop a little bit longer than he should, but we ultimately got him here because kind of combine like what they will and what they should, because JK here makes too much sense. And you talk about the Chiefs and their defense, like their defense is good enough that they have the luxury to do whatever the fuck they want. And if you add J.K. Dobbins to the offense that they have with Pat Mahomes and Hill and Travis Kelce and their stud offensive line, like I don't know if we've ever seen an offense like this since maybe the Rams when they had Marshall Faulk and all them cats.
I want to see it. Like we had talked about this.
Who was going to stop the Chiefs?
Yeah.
Who was going to stop them?
It made so much sense. I wish he would have came out. It made so much sense for Travis Etienne to go to the Kansas City Chiefs.
100%.
Dude, with that speed. Could you imagine that team speed at the skill position with him added at running
But that's
back?
not like he reminds me a lot of what JK can do. They're kind of similar backs, so the fact that JK would be available here, they got it.
Etienne's a little bit faster, but I mean, no, JK
they have a similar skill set is kind of what I mean.
JK is, I mean, he's incredible.
But I mean, I feel like I could play running back half the time if Pat Mahomes is my quarterback in that offense. Like to put one of the better running backs who's going to come into the league and be one of the better like they're going to be the most unstoppable offense
It'd
of all
be sweet.
time.
I want to see it.
I hope they do it because they will not.
It's great that Patrick Mahomes is crazy good and likable. Like I don't even care. I want to see them pump out Super Bowls. I want to see their offense like the most stacked we've ever seen, and just
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah,
I'd be fine with that.
Sweet.
And we talk about this is just first round. They can build up some of those holes in defense in the later drafts. There's plenty of guys who are later in drafts who come and just be long-term starters in the NFL, and they already have several studs, as you mentioned. So they fill some of those slots later in the draft, plus build that offense that is completely unstoppable. They might not lose a game.
Yeah, it would be
of
sweet.
Of course, they'll probably lose, but
yeah,
they might not lose a game.
Yeah. No, the Chiefs are fun. I think J.K. Dobbins in that offense would be incredible.
So anyways, that is our mock draft. Hopefully we'll have another one of these in several weeks after free agency, because a lot potentially could change, especially with all these quarterbacks up for grabs in free agency. So had a lot of fun with this. Might have to do it again here in a couple weeks. But in the meantime, it's been a pleasure, Jeffrey.
As always, man.
Peace.